Potential trades. What do you think about the Trent Williams idea? It's still out there.
Well, he's been collecting dust for like 5 weeks now, more than that. Washington's got to move him. Like, if they're going to start over completely with, Jay Gruden's gone, they're going to allegedly focus on the run more, and they want to be that team. I thought Bill Callahan, I thought when I heard him say that, I was like, am I talking to Mike Zimmer right now? But no, I mean, they can get a first round pick for Williams and potentially even more, I think. So they need to be looking for teams that need offensive line help. I know that in Barnwell's article, he has him trading to, he's like, there's plenty of teams, but there's only one obvious candidate. And I was like, huh? I thought there'd be more than that. He has him going to the Browns.
Oh yeah.
Like
wow.
that,
after last night.
After I thought about that, I was like, okay, that's fair.
The Browns also tried to block Bosa with a tight end yesterday, and it was the most
funny how
thing
teams that do that realize. I mean, well, if you could talk to Kyle Rudolph about that, he loves blocking defensive
favorite
ends.
thing in the entire world. Just
yes.
loves blocking Khalil Mack. It's what he always dreamed of.
Could I see Trent Williams coming here? Well, what's going to happen with Riley Reif, and who are you going to pair him with? Because
how are you making the cap space also?
I think the thing we need to talk about first when it comes to trades and any player, anything that's going to happen in this calendar year, or up until when's the draft next year? Like April 26th again. They cannot get rid of the first round pick that they currently have. They are probably going to have to draft a quarterback.
Looks like a pretty decent quarterback draft at the moment.
And right now it looks okay with Jalen Hurts. Tua Tagovailoa will be gone by then. There's Justin Gilbert. There's the other Herbert.
Yeah. Jordan Love is another guy people like.
There's there's a few others that might sneak into the first round, but there's at least those top 3 guys that we know right now. And so I think you protect that first round pick at all costs if you're Rick Spielman, but you could still potentially entertain the idea of getting some offensive line help, figuring out your cornerback situation beyond this season by potentially moving some pieces and gaining some pieces. And if you want to entertain the idea of a Stefon Diggs trade, like, while I certainly do not think they move him by the deadline, A, because they're not really an active team at the deadline ever with this current regime, and B, they do not want to move him. Mike Zimmer wants him here. The front office wants him here. Like, just not logical to trade a good player right now, who you have under contract for 3 more years. But
who's young,
good. But I could, I'm not going to put the possibility of seeing him gone in the offseason in March.
I would agree with that, but it just has to be a lot. I mean, even if someone offers you a first round pick, this was Peter King throwing it out there, saying that Diggs isn't worth a first round pick.
What?
Like, are you out of your bleeping mind?
Is he just using the logic that he was a 5th rounder and he's not a top 10 receiver by some accounts and things like that? Okay.
I think it's just, he's the number 2 receiver on that team. But as we know, he's a
number 1 on
he's either exactly as good or a little better than Adam Thielen at actually doing the things that make receivers great. And that's part of his frustration, is that he knows that. And you see it on tape all the time. I'm sure when you look at this, you see the same thing, is like Diggs stealing people's souls out there and then just not getting the ball. I mean,
there was on that, I think on the Thielen 44-yard catch, Diggs was wide open for a touchdown.
Yep, absolutely. And
it's got to add to the frustration. Are we using the word frustration?
Yeah, I think so. You are media, so I guess you can use that. Only media used the word frustration. Yes. No players, just media, actually. But I could see it in the offseason. It wouldn't make any sense now.
No.
I mean, Peter King is saying, trade him for a 2nd and a 4th or something this year if things go sideways. But things can't go sideways enough to trade Stefon Diggs. The worst you can be going into the bye or the trade deadline is 4-4, I think, with this team. If they lost the next 2, they're still beating Washington. Yeah. Washington fired their coach, has 0 wins, doesn't know who their quarterback is. Like, you're beating that team. And that's at home. Like, you're beating that team no matter what.
The trade deadline would be, that's the last game before the trade deadline, which is October 29th.
Right. So you're not
the worst you will
on the second half of the season.
Is 4-4.
It doesn't. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. The only scenario where you could trade Diggs would be to someone who's going to give you back something really good, but then you have to put somebody into a system they don't know for the second half of the season. It was a Miles Jack, by the way, who wore 44, the linebacker. He's pretty good. Still, usually a tell for you're not a good linebacker, you're a special teamer if you're wearing in the mid-40s. The Trent Williams idea for Diggs doesn't make sense to me, because even though Williams is great, he's older, he's been hurt. I don't know how to make that thing happen. Like it makes a lot of sense. And Riley Reef against good edge rushers is not helpful.
Do you think they're kicking themselves now saying we really should have moved him inside to left guard, kept Pat Elflein at center, and then they could have drafted differently or drafted a tackle? They could have gotten Andre Dillard.
Well, that's always going to be,
The what
for
if
me,
game.
the thing I go back to is I know that they already had a left tackle for this year. We're trying to find a scheme fit, but the number one most important thing in football, in winning, and always has been, is how well do you pass the football and how well do you protect your quarterback to do it. We saw what Kirk Cousins did, although the Giants had no clue what was going on in the secondary. It was a peewee team. But anyway, like Cousins had time.
Yeah.
And there were throws where he dropped back 3 steps, took a hitch, took a throw, and right on the money. Like he can do those things if he has time. His best season, 2016, was when he had a lot of time to throw the football because they had a great offensive line. And to draft a center who's not really good at pass blocking is always going to be questionable, I think, because you wanted to run outside zone.
And to draft a center that high. I know that we all...
Especially when the other centers in the draft, a lot of people had them about equal, and they've performed better than him so far.
Yeah, and I mean, you can make the scheme fit argument over, high ceiling or anything else, and that they can develop in, and that it'll take time. But the way I think the offensive line, I think it's fair to say they've gotten by this year. It hasn't been a complete, total, utter meltdown collapse like we saw at certain points in 2018. But eventually that unit's going to get probably a little bit more exposed than it has been.
Yeah.
Even last week with Pat Elflein and Garrett Bradbury, I mean, there was botched
Which
snaps.
I know Alex Boone can't wait to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't look great. And so can you upgrade the offensive line right now or ahead of the trade deadline? Sure. I mean, Trent Williams is an option. At that point, it's Reef and probably I'm not giving up that first round pick. So Reef in a second and something else. I mean, there's never going to be a straight up player for player trade.
Doesn't Washington have to live in reality that they're just not ever going to have Trent Williams play football for them again? I mean, this guy has made enough money to where he doesn't have to play their game. Like he could just say, I'm done at 31 years old. I'm going to retire.
Yeah, but the Vikings just don't have that cap space right now. So you have to think about it logically of like, who can you move? Like, and what else are they going to ask for? Because they're definitely asking for a draft pick on top of the player. I think so.
So what happened with Trent Williams' cap hit here? Now it looks much smaller than it did before. Did something happen with his cap hit in terms of the date and things like that? Because right now over the cap says $3.5 million would be his cap. Must be for the rest of the way, or what does that mean? Is that a mistake?
Let's see. Washington Redskins.
I thought it was in a much higher range than that. Because next year it says $14 million for him.
I have him at ESPN's roster management system has him with a $11 million cap.
Okay, that's what I thought. There must be something off here with over the cap.
But I do think that there's something there that might have something to do because he was on the do not report list.
Okay, if something triggered there, so it's a lower cap hit, then all in.
Yeah, so it says roster bonus of $15,625 per game active, maximum value is $250K. $150,000 base salary de-escalator if player fails to complete workouts. So that goes into it as well.
Let me throw this scenario at you then. We've sort of assumed that you would move Reef to Washington if you were going to make that trade. Well, what if you didn't? Now the cap space becomes a little harder, but if it is a smaller cap hit, then it's a lot more realistic. What if instead you moved Riley Reef inside, like they had talked about, to guard? Because it's not working with Pat Elflein right now.
And what do you do with Elflein? Move him back to center? Because it's not working with Bradbury.
It's not working with Bradbury either. I would say either move him to center or move him to left bench. I mean, it's been that bad. I get the Giants, the whole rest of the offensive line against the Giants, including Garrett Bradbury, had a good day. And Elflein got smoked. And it's like, man, if you can't hold down the Giants, that is an abysmal defense.
Yeah, and I mean, their pass rush was at points, I will say.
It was bad. They weren't good.
There were a few times when Kirk dropped back, and I was like, just roll out.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's always going to make everyone look better,
and that's fine. But I mean, yeah, it's the biggest thing to me is are we going to look back at that and say they never should have moved him from center? Pat Elflein, that is. They never should have. I mean, he's not a fit really in this scheme. Like if they're talking about outside zone, things like that, and they do mix a lot of blocking schemes, but for the majority of what they run, he looks like he's always the guy getting blown by and looking behind him and wondering how that guy got in the backfield. And we can't blame it on injuries anymore. It's not,
Mhm.
oh, well, he had an off season, he had 2 surgeries, things like that. Like it's a big problem now. And
Yep.
he's the weak link and he's getting exposed. I mean, Josh Klein, like think about what they did with the entire offseason with this offensive line. They guarantee him $7.5 million and he's an average right guard. But he's played better than your guy that you drafted, with your 3rd round pick 2
Mhm.
years ago that you anticipated could potentially be your franchise center.
Yeah.
Like
They're going to let Bradbury work through it. I mean, if they don't, it's just going to be such a bad look.
And they can't because like think about it, like with they already had to kind of admit the mistake with Elflein. They can't do it like for 2 out of 3 years with Bradbury and be like, yeah, well, we've got to go draft another center. We've got to go draft another interior lineman next year.
And if you think about it, going left to right, you have a $50 million left tackle who hasn't really been very good for you.
Average.
A left at best. I mean, but not a pass protection, which to me is more valuable. So I think he's just been poor.